A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth and citations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. And listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always, Yahweh Ratazah, Yahweh willing, this lesson may be edifying. And for today's lesson, just going to be a little bit of exhortation. I titled it, actually I borrowed the title from 1 Corinthians, the 8th chapter, in regards to having wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And essentially, but one of the things what can happen with acquiring knowledge is the fact that it can be puffed up, right? So a person, and me, even myself, I'm very much guilty of this, is the fact that having wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, it can, it's a blessing, right? Scriptures say that we are saved through grace, by faith. It's roughly paraphrased, but not of ourselves. It's a gift, right? So we didn't really, do any extensive, hard work to acquire this gift, right? So, but that's one of the things I've noticed about having knowledge, is the fact that it can lead you to being puffed up, right? So just something to be mindful of, because and that's another thing also, with the vibration of making, and not just making, excuse me, but like reading excessive amount of books, and and all that kind of stuff. Having knowledge, the books might be pertaining, pertaining to our history and so on and so forth, but a lot of those things, a lot of times it can lead you and puff you up, right? And like I said before, I myself, very much guilty of this. And one of the things that I've learned through that experience is the fact that remembering the idea of servitude, right? Because that kind of brings you down to a more grounded, more humility type of level, right? So I guess I'll just start off here in 1 Corinthians, the 8th chapter. Excuse me. 1 Corinthians verse 8, verse 1, and it says, "Now, as touching things offered unto idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth," right? So let me see what it says in regards to let me see what that says.
Strong's G 5448. Fusiao.
Okay, so it says Fuzi IO, but if you look at the word, it literally looks like physio. Okay, so here it says to inflate, to blow up, to cause to swell up, to make proud, and to be puffed up. It says to bear oneself loftily and be proud, right? So that is a vibration that is something that can happen to any one of us in regards to having knowledge. It can lead you to being puffed up to the point where you think you don't essentially you don't essentially need any type of correction or anything like that, right? So remembering that we didn't gift ourselves this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, right? We didn't just start speaking for myself, because like I didn't, I personally went to school, and coming into this understanding of knowing your nationality and your heritage and so on and so forth, this is something that was far beyond what I've ever been taught in in these universities and colleges and all that kind of stuff, right? Far supersedes it, I should say, right? So the point is that we didn't work hard to obtain it, right? So the thing is, having it. Well, this is one of the things that just to be mindful of and just to be aware of, right? And especially if you're the type of person, you like a lot of I guess extracurricular studies. And when I say that, I mean like, with the extra books and so on and so forth, right? Nothing, too like outlandish, but I'm saying this to say that also these things can also add to that sentiment of being puffed up also, because having access to a lot of that knowledge, it can add more fuel to the fire, so it's always important to remain at a ground level, but just be mindful of those different books. So for me personally, one of the things I've done is to kind of just like, kind of put it to the side and kind of just pretty much focus on character and the character of Yahushua, really, right? Because that's really the standard, and you just want to implement and work on that standard of adding those virtues like it speaks about in I believe it's Peter's, Second Peter's or First Peter's, right? But that's pretty much the point, and understand, and then remembering the milk, just simple things, right? Because those things really, really, when you think about sincere milk, right? Like I was reading this recently, when babies are receiving that milk, that milk is so important because it really covers a foundation of a plethora of different things that baby needs to be properly nourished. So for example, it gets from the milk, they get their carbohydrates, they get their proteins, they get their fats, they get all the essential nutrients. They even get protection for their immune system, brain support, like everything is kind of like covered in the milk, right? And I mean that on a physical level, so how much more on a spiritual level, right? So just because I mentioned the books, here's one of the things here's one of the precepts, excuse me, that just backs up that point. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 12, and it says, "And further by these, my son, be admonished, for of the making of many books of the making of many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh." And it says in the AMP here, "But beyond this, my son, and about going further than the words given by one shepherd, be warned, the writing of many books is endless." And it's true, because it's like there's so much in, like the scriptures talk about how knowledge shall be increased. There's like so much information like out there, like so much information, right? And that's just what we have access to, right? So the point is to kind of like bring things back into centerfold, is really just just focus on the example Yahushua laid out, and then just going into a lot of these stories pretty much of our righteous forefathers, and understanding the things that they did do that was pleasing unto the Lord, right? That they did, the sense of moral excellence that they exemplified, and then even learning from the things of even unrighteous kings did, the things that they did, right? To kind of like, okay, because the scriptures do talk about the things that are written aforetime are written for our learning, and these are the things that are so like beneficial, because when you really think about it and you strip it away, that's like, yo, that's really our history, right? And one of the things I've also noticed when you go into a lot of these other different books, a lot of the information, a lot of the information is really, really good, but at the same time, you don't get a lot of character building. Like you get when you go through Yahushai's story, when you go through these stories of, the kings and the chronicles and the things that, and the mistakes that they made, right? And even the things that there were not even mistakes, I should say, like the opposite of a mistake. So essentially the things that the Lord looked upon them very, very favorably because of the things and actions they did, right? So those things are always, helpful nuggets for us, in this time, right? So hopefully all this is piecing together and making sense. Just bear with me on this. But I guess another portion of the lesson I kind of want to talk about, really, because the precept did say charity edifieth, right? So Paul always talks about this. Let me get something that Paul actually said. This is 1 Corinthians 13, and it says, this is verse 1. And if I speak, I'm reading in the AMP, so it says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love for others growing out of the Most High's love for me, then I have become only a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, just an annoying distraction. And though I have the gift of prophecy and speak a new message from the Most High to the people, and understand all mysteries and possess all knowledge, and if I have all sufficient faith so that I can remove mountains, and have not love, I am nothing. So in the KJV it says, and though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains and have not charity, I'm nothing. So let's get that word charity. What does that say? Okay, the word here is agape. It says affection, goodwill, benevolence, brotherly love, right? Let's see if there's any more here. So the same word is also used in John the 13th chapter, when Yahushua said, and ye shall know that these are my disciples for the way ye love one another, right? So the same love is expressed in that same chapter, and that's a very powerful chapter too, because it shows you Yahushua was laying down an example. So really and truly, it's really going back to the importance of Yahushua and the example he laid out, right? So that's where you really get true love to actually flourish, right? Because I mean, honestly speaking, like knowing some of the extra information is great, but the character really does go a long way, if I'm being completely honest, right? The character goes such a long way. Like, for example, I remember years ago, I was at it was like a Western African restaurant, and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of hungry, let me go get something to eat. And I remember standing by the bartender and the bar, I was just waiting to place my order. I don't even remember what I said. I just remember ordering the food, and then there was a Jake standing next to me, and he said, you have not to boast in myself. I'm just saying, you're very well mannered, right? So knowing like those little things go a long way. You know what I'm saying? Knowing those little things always go a long way. That's the point. I'm not saying this story to kind of boost up myself. I'm only just saying to show you the importance of those little things, right? Okay, I'll just read down in this chapter a little bit. I kind of wanted to touch on something Yahushua said also. This is verse 3, and it says, and though I bestow all my goods and feed to the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profit me nothing. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not, and charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, right? So it's essentially, a lot of it, in the moments, moments of charity, you kind of have, it requires a sense of self-denial, right? Because the flesh is really, really selfish, so putting, making sure, another is okay, another brother is okay, just checking in and all that kind of stuff, right? you know and Yahushua even talked about that too. He said, these two laws hang all the law and the prophets, roughly paraphrase, right? So really truly, when you think about it, the objective is to focus on Yahushua. That's really what it is, right? Because he is the example, he's the template, he is the author and the finisher, right? He laid out that blueprint of how for us to conduct ourselves, right? He mentioned, as a matter of fact, let me get it. And this is Luke chapter 22. I'll start at verse 26, and it says, "But ye shall not be so, but he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he that is chief, excuse me, as he that doth serve." Yahushua speaking. And it says, whether he is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth, it is not that sitteth at meat, but I am among you as he that serveth, right? So Yahushua, laid out an example of actual servitude, right? And that's a high value trait when you really, really think about it, because you're giving people, because people rely on you, when people think about servitude, it seems like, they think about, the people who work in, like, not retail per se, but working in restaurants, but that requires, a sentiment of patience, because, like, when you're, like, say for example, you're somebody, you're a server at a restaurant, you got to be patient, with the people, and so on and so forth. So it kind of involves, and then on top of that, it also requires a sense of composure too, because sometimes, customer might come in and they're dealing with something, and you have to, maintain, like they say in the manosphere, maintain frame, so to speak. So you kind of have to maintain a sentiment of composure, right? But the point is, it requires sometimes a subjecting of yourself, right, to actually assist another, right? So let me go to this. This is neat. Where am I? Okay, this is Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 16, and it says, yea, also I continued in the work of this wall, neither bought we any land. And all my servants were gathered together thither unto the work. Moreover, there were at my table 150 of the Jews and rulers, beside those that came unto us from among the heathen that were about us. Now that which was prepared for me daily was 1 ox and 6 choice sheep, and fowls were prepared for me. And once in 10 days store all sorts of wine. Yet for all this required not the bread of the governor, because the bondage was so heavy on on this people, right? So they, our people, there were some of our people, and during this time, they were oppressing their own kin, their own kinfolk, their own fellow brethren, right? And Nehemiah kind of had to like step in and kind of abolish a lot of this usury and call out, the more people who are a little bit more well off, because they were essentially, I don't want to say persecute, but essentially they were putting heavier financial burdens. So essentially, when you really think about it, if you care about your own kin, you're not going to do certain things because you have a healthy fear of the Lord, right? And that's kind of the sentiment we have for each other. We're not going to do certain things to one another because we have that understanding and that reference for Yahweh Bashem Shai, right? So, so what Nehemiah is really explaining here, like, okay, being a governor of Judah, there was not a requirement per se, but there was you get certain perks, like kind of like a job, that you work for the government or whatever. A job comes with certain perks. It comes with I don't know, you might get access to a gym membership, you might get access to a pool, you might get a little bit more time off for vacation, this and that, that and the fourth, right? So just like prestigious government job, it's the same thing with him being the governor, over in Judah, in the land of Judah, right? So he had certain perks, but he didn't want to take advantage and capitalize on those perks, because he understood that there were some of his own people, other Israelites, that were not as well off as he was, right? If you think about it, Cupbearer probably doing really good back in them times, and he had to be super trustworthy, right? So he didn't really demand that governor's allowance, that food allowance, right? Because he had a mindset of more of servitude, because he had to essentially kind of serve the people, right, that were not a little bit little on the less fortunate side, right? So this is verse 19, and it says, "Think upon me, O my power, Yahweh Bashem Shai, for good, according to all I have done for this people," right? In the AMP, it says, "Remember me, O my power, Yahweh Bashem Shai, for good, according to all I have done for this people," right? So, going back to the point of servitude, going back to the point of, Yahweh Shai, exemplifying that sort of like mindset, right? That helps to ward away a lot of these feelings of being puffed up, because it kind of you're in a situation where you're kind of forced to be humble, right? Scriptures talk about how pride is not made for men, right? So anyways, I sincerely pray this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Shai. Until next time, I say shalom.